Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and this hits Billboard Breakdown. You know, given how the past week has been, it's very tempting for me to just step up in here, say the Billboard Hot 100 shit itself inside out this week, like for most of the rest of this 2018, and let's not mince words, it's about as bad as I've seen in the Hot 100 in the past couple of years I've been doing this show. But hey, it could have been worse, right? We didn't get a full album bomb from XXXTentacion, that was a possibility, and while I sure as hell don't think our replacements are anything close to good, hell, I think some of them might even be worse, I have to keep on reassuring myself with the thoughts that this could have been a much more miserable experience than it actually is. And if you want a glaring example of where this could have been, take a look at our top 10, where Drake is still sitting on top with God's Plan for another week. But while I don't quite see it getting unseated with all that streaming it still has, its sales and radio are looking a little bit shakier. But honestly, I might probably still prefer it than our number 2, Meant to Be by BB Rexa featuring Florida Georgia Line. And let's put aside the pointless circling conversation whether this is country or not. It's not. I've accepted this, you haven't, let's move on. But let's agree that it's vapid, it's flatly produced, it's got no significant flavor, and yet the radio loves it, and people keep on buying it, even despite streaming slipping back a little bit. It still rose above Perfect by Ed Sheeran at number 3, but that probably would have happened anyway, given how its sales and radio are dipping. But I genuinely thought this would be an opportunity for Finesse by Bruno Mars and Cardi B to advance, but nope, given how much the sales have dropped and how all it really has is radio and residual YouTube, it's stumbled back to number 4. At least it held up above Psycho by Post Malone featuring Ty Dolla $ign. That's at number 5 with its radio pickups compensating for streaming slips. But really, I can see it getting even higher next week. Hell, it'll probably take The Middle by Zedd, Maren Morris, and Grey up with it to number 6 given how good its radio is. But again, those sales kind of dropped off and the streaming isn't great. That's kind of interesting. But now we have to deal with the first new arrival and one that I predicted last week, Sad by XXXTentacion at number 7. Now the good news is that it doesn't seem to have a lot of longevity here. The sales, they really aren't there, the radio's non-existent, and once the album bomb fades away, most of the streaming will go away with it. But it's still put it above Havana by Camila Cabello featuring Young Thug at number 8, which is just bleeding across the board. And that makes it vulnerable to our second new top 10 entry, which I'll be discussing in a lot more detail later on the show, Freaky Friday by Lil Dicky featuring Chris Brown at number 9. Again, the good news is that all it really has is streaming and sales, more sales than I would like, because the fact that the sales numbers are as high as they are, it's a pretty scathing indictment of whoever actually bought this. And finally, Pray For Me by The Weeknd and Kendrick Lamar at number 10, which did not have a good week across the board, but it's still clinging to the top 10 overall. I expect it might rebound a little bit when the chart resets after the album bomb last week, but hey, we'll see. But on that note, let's dig into our losers and dropouts. And in the latter category, aside from all the Logic and Lil Yachty getting swept away, there's only 3 really big ones. River by Eminem featuring Ed Sheeran, likely gonna miss the year-end list. Plain Jane by A$AP Ferg, and finally, Sorry Not Sorry by Demi Lovato. Don't feel bad about the latter two, they're gonna wind up on the year-end list for 2018, for better or for worse. But when it comes to our losses, man, it's all over the place. We got the expected slips off the debuts like Zombie by Bad Wolves at 68, and NBA Young Boat by Lil Yachty featuring Young Boy Never Broke Again at 77, and the collapses for Logic's Gains with 44 more down to 70, and Everyday with Marshmello down to 56. But then we get the continued losses like Written in the Sand by Old Dominion to 92, or Top Off by DJ Khaled featuring Jay-Z, Future, and Beyonce to 62, and Gummo by 6ix9ine to 63. Hell, 6ix9ine as a whole didn't have a good week as Billy fell to 61. Good. But for the rest of our losses, well, Nowadays by Lil Skies featuring Landon Cube kind of fizzled to 81, and How Long by Charlie Puth, it's fading out naturally to 48, but what kind of stung for me was seeing Broken Halos by Chris Stapleton falling back to 55. I mean, it's not surprising, given that radio will probably fizzle on this song soon, and it's kind of a miracle it got as high as it did, but still, for Chris Stapleton's sake, I wish it stuck around a little bit longer. But hell, if you're going to our re-entries and gains right now, it's a total mess too. In the former category, you do get some nice returns like Tequila by Dan and Shay to 87, and Sativa by Jhené Aiko featuring Sway Lee to 91. Hell, I'll even stump for La Modelo by Ozuna and Cardi B at 98, mostly for Cardi B. But then you get Tempo by Chris Brown back to 94 as well. And for our gains, well, there's more than you would expect on a traditional album bomb week, but I'd struggle to get all that excited by their prospects going forward. Yes, I'm pretty happy that Delicate by Taylor Swift got a big boost off the debut to 66, and that Lemon by NERD and Rihanna jumped up to 40 thanks to the Drake remix that got so much traction. But on the topic of Drake, he also pushed Walk It, Talk It with Migos up big to 20 as I predicted last week. Then we had the XXXTentacion gains. I already mentioned Sad, but also as I predicted, Changes went up to 37. And on the train of bad songs, Friends by Marshmello and Anne-Marie continued up to 28, and X by Nicky Jam and J Balvin went up to 59. Just friggin' lovely. Now for the rest, Power Glide by Ray Shermer and Juicy J's up to 51. The production's not bad, it kinda grew on me. Arguably the best any lead-off single that they've had from Shrimp Life 3. All on Me by Devin Dawson got a boost up to 52 thanks to decent radio. And I Lived It by Blake Shelton went up to 85 for pretty much most of the same reasons. But hey, we've avoided the true garbage for a while, so let's start off with the surprise for me this week with number 100, Everybody Hates Me by the Chainsmokers.
I walk into the club like everybody hates me. I'm talking to myself, shit, now they think I'm crazy. I walk into the club like everybody hates me. Everybody hates me. Like everybody hates me.
Oh, it's nice when the title reflects reality. Okay, I get that the Chainsmokers might have picked up on the fact that their brand of overly earnest EDM pop isn't winning them any fans these days. I sure as hell didn't like that full-length debut, and the backlash that they've gotten was pretty severe. But I'm also not going to deny that one of the reasons that they did so well was looking past the critical consensus to tap into a very basic emotive core for their very basic audience. And thus when I see them wanting to be 21 Pilots and pile on the angst, it not only feels like this is a regression, it makes them feel increasingly insufferable. You made shallow music, guys. Self-reflexively bitching about how we didn't like it after you made your paycheck somehow makes you look even worse. We're not going to feel sorry for you. What's awkward is now they're trying to pair it with the by the numbers, hyper-earnest, glittery EDM drops and a crooning hook where they say everybody hates them when they walk into the club. And not only can the duo not really sell this noxious side of their self-pity, they can't even effectively deny that's what they're doing on the second verse, even when they follow it up with the acknowledgement that they did make it. Yes, it's probably all going a little bit too far to hold all the dumb shit that the Chainsmokers have said and done in the past against them. They kind of grown up since then. But if you're trying to stay normal, implying a connection to your past, you yourselves are reinforcing it. And when you consider that none of this reflects any desire to take on any personal responsibility, and of course another girl who cheated on them to further frame them as victims, all against production with no palpable intensity or punch even against those flimsy guitars, no, sorry. Guys, I'm not buying this. I'm not down with it at all. Next, number 95, Going Down by XXXTentacion.
Going down, it's going down. Oh my god, shawty think she, oh my god, yeah. Oh my god, shawty think she, oh my god.
Okay, look, there's only 5 XXXTentacion songs that broke through this week, and considering I already spent over 15 minutes eviscerating that record at length on my other review, I'm gonna keep this brief. It's easily one of the worst songs on the album thanks to the ugly, gummy synthesizers, the faux Lil Uzi Vert vocal delivery, the blocky percussion, the lines, I am the shit, need a diaper, and beating the pussy like Viking, all of which is set up against a clumsy flow switch and him talking about how he feels like fighting when he's drunk, which might just be the worst possible subtext for that last line, my god. So yeah, this is garbage, but really, as I said it before, you knew it already. Next, number 86, Sit Next to Me by Foster the People.
You can see when things go naturally. Just say the word and I'll part the scene. Just come over here and sit next to me.
I literally had to force myself to remember that Foster the People put out a record last summer. Hell, I reviewed that album. The review did pretty well, and I remember listening to it close when I went to a convention, and yet that record left so little impact on me that I seriously thought this might have been a new single for a new album. Now, going back to my review, I actually did mention this song for actually having a pretty slick, glossy, new wave groove that plays off a languid little bit of bass and a solid synth bounce on the hook. Actually, I really like a lot of the synth elements, and the key shift midway through the bridge actually has some progressive, almost psychedelic potential. But then you dig into the lyrics, and you realize this is a song about Mark Foster stealing some girl from her boyfriend, who he then threatens to have outlined in chalk. And putting aside the murderous implications, the larger problem is that Mark Foster just does not have the presence and charisma to anchor that sort of implication, especially when he dips into his squawking falsetto on the hook that did not sound good. I mean, it's not a bad song, I've heard worse from this group, but an indie rock scene with so many other people approaching this sound and doing it better, Foster the People are decidedly middle of the pack. At best. Number 84, One Number Away by Luke Combs.
When I said I'm leaving and not coming back, might be the whiskey or the midnight rain, but everywhere I go I see your face in my brain, dialing up everything I want to say, but I'm still one number away.
So I've generally been ambivalent to positive on most of the singles that Luke Combs has released thus far. He's got a solid mid-2000s sensibility to his delivery and a lot of his production and composition that's kind of charming, and he tends to put more details into his songwriting than a lot of his peers. And yet, this song plays to kind of different territory, with the acoustics exposing a much darker, much more brittle edge. But then it pivots to a much brighter, thinner acoustic line for the hook, and it can't help but feel kind of odd against the spikes of electric guitar and the touches of pedal steel. I won't deny that it kind of fits the frustrated, regretful feel of the song, thinking about an ex that he left behind and now wants back. Almost reminiscent of Jake Owen's Ghost Town from about 5 or so years ago that I really liked, but this song feels really clunky, especially with the pivot into that hook. It just doesn't come together. It's not bad, don't get me wrong, but of all his singles thus far, I can't quite get behind this one probably the most. Not bad, but not good either. Number 83, Infinity 888 by XXXTentacion featuring Joey Badass.
I keep a razor blade tuck on me under my tongue. Don't let me have to tell these niggas about the city I'm from. It's Brooklyn, be the home of the hardest ever. Where them niggas don't aim, they just palm Berettas and bomb whatever. So we don't move calmly, never. This for my niggas trapped in cells like salmonella.
It leaves a really sour taste in my mouth that it required goddamn XXXTentacion to get Joey Badass to finally chart on the Hot 100, but I wasn't lying when I said this is the best song from Question Mark, although that's really not saying much. Again, I really dig the touches of the horns from the Bill Evans sample and the old school boom bap beat that Joey Badass can ride effortlessly, and his verse is really damn good, although that intro talking about how he's capturing all the sexually transmitted diseases in the world to save others is probably the sort of idea he should have shelved and rethought. But even when XXXTentacion drops into his double time flow on his verse, he just doesn't have the same flexibility and potency that Joey does, even with a similar brand of hermetic self-flagellation and numbness. But even with that, you know what, it's tolerable, and if there was going to be a song to get big from Question Mark, I'd probably prefer it to be this. But on the topic of numbness, number 82, Numb by XXXTentacion. So am I the only one who feels that the content of this song just doesn't really match the tone or idea of numbness? Now for the obvious comparison, let's go to the song The Same Name by Linkin Park, which yes, still had plenty of intensity that might feel out of place, but leveraged it to crank up the curdled anger at feeling numb, and still the glossy synthesizers to kind of match that tone aesthetically. And not only is XXXTentacion not even close to being as good of a songwriter in composition or writing as Chester Bennington was, repeating the same bare bones strum chords and lines do not a good song make, even if you tap on hints of electric guitars and strings to crank up the melodrama. But there's not even a trace of numbness in how he wallows and how he causes other people pain and how we should feel sorry for him and blah blah blah. That's not happening. Next, number 72, In My Blood by Shawn Mendes. not sure it's a good sign if I'm actively looking forward to a new single from Shawn Mendes, but hey, he surprised me last year with There's Nothing Holding Me Back, and I had heard this song was even more of a step towards quality, so I had some reason to be excited, and yeah, it's not bad at all. For one, even though I'm not sure the blocky percussion helps the acoustic groove, I'm gonna blame Teddy Geiger for that in the production. I do like how the song pushes Shawn Mendes towards some real raw intensity that I'd say is more close to rock if the guitars were allowed to really roar. But again, it kind of makes sense that it doesn't really all the way get there. This is all about facing one's own anxiety and getting out of one's own head if you even can. And Shawn Mendes does a palpable job of selling and encapsulating that trapped feel, especially as he knows very much that it's not intrinsic to who he is. It's not in his blood. If anything, it kind of reminds me of Jason Isbell's song Anxiety from his last album, The Nashville Sound, which plays a very similar dynamic just with way more power and pathos. It's a better song. But hey, if Shawn Mendes can make the mainstream pop version of that and deliver it credibly, then I'll give him credit for it. This is a decent song. I'll take it. Nice job. Number 67, The Remedy for a Broken Heart, Why Am I So in Love by XXXTentacion.
We gon' be, mix a little bit of weed with a little bit of cash, with a little bit of this, with a little bit of that. We gon' be,
Okay, I didn't really bring this up in the review of the album, but on this song, for as much as it's trying to get over this girl and snap how his sadness cuts deeper because all the money and freedom, because it's not worth it if it's not love, why then is the hook actively focus on getting weed and cash in order to recover here? Seriously, there's no ironic juxtaposition or implication that it's not enough beyond that lo-fi mumble droning as the bare bones acoustics and blocky beat. And even on that verse, he still mentions the expensive watch that he bought this girl for whom he's one trying to save. No, I'm sorry, not buying it. It's incoherent and barely having any real meat to it, despite the unsettling implications. Just skip it. Move on. Number 49, Found Tonight by Lin-Manuel Miranda and Ben
But I will
Platt.
gladly join the fight. And when our children tell their story, they'll tell the story of tonight. They'll tell the story of tonight. Tonight.
It's okay, some context. You might know who Lin-Manuel Miranda is from In the Heights or Moana, or most likely from Hamilton, but Ben Platt is also a Broadway actor who had the starring role in the musical Dear Evan Hansen, and this is a mashup of a cut from that musical with the story of Tonight from Hamilton, created to raise money for the March for Our Lives, which happened last weekend, and yeah, it's the best thing that came out of this week, without question, and it's almost strikingly on the nose, the lyrics against the bare bones piano and the strings, but the two stage veterans have really superb chemistry in their harmonies, and hell, if you know the context from the musical, both of them, it's striking how much it captures the youthful desperation in the face of loneliness, the collective affirmation that we can be more and rise up, look into the future, a drive to make a real change. And you know, it's a goddamn tragedy. This is the closest thing the Hot 100 will see to either musical amidst a swath of self-indulgent bullshit. But my god, I'll take what I can get. It's a genuinely beautiful song, and while I've got no expectations that it'll stick around, it's still excellent. I'm cherishing while we get it. Definitely make a chance. Check it out. Number 35, Moonlight by XXXTentacion.
Shawty look good in the moonlight. All these pussy niggas so bad, man. Spotlight, moonlight. Nigga, why you tripping? Get your mood right. Shawty look good in the moonlight. All these pussy niggas so bad, man.
Okay, last one. And seriously, we're doing this. Another amateurish undercooked tune with awful clicking percussion, bubbly fragments of a melody, a limp hook of flexing that's longer than the single verse where XXXTentacion talks about stabbing people, and alternatively pines about and bitches about that girl that left him behind. A girl, if we believe the court documents, he abused, and no, I'm not gonna stop bringing it up. Again, he has no sympathy for me. And when the song is this incompetent, he doesn't deserve it. And I have no desire to hear anything more from this guy. Let's get out of it. Next. And finally, number 9, Freaky Friday by Little Dicky featuring Chris Brown.
I'm so fly and I can dance. There's tattoos on my neck. I just FaceTime Kanye. I told him I'm his biggest fan, yeah. Got all these hoes in my DM. Yeah, I do. Hold up. Holy shit, I got a kid.
So let me make this abundantly clear. There is a part of me that is genuinely enraged that Lil Dicky now has a top 10 hit, but I think it's instructive to place culture vultures in their necessary context, because this is a novelty song, based off of a body-swapping gimmick that was tired in the Lindsay Lohan comedy featuring it 15 years ago. That's all it is, that's all it's ever gonna be, and it's only worth getting really angry at these two walking punchlines, for different reasons of course, if the song truly sucked. And wow, it does, in so many interesting and excruciating ways. For one, Chris Brown's verse, from Lil Dicky's perspective, is all about the euphoria about having to be able to sing with gratuitous autotune, and then say the N-word over and over and over again, and highlight how he is light-skinned black. But oh, it gets better, because then we get Lil Dicky, from Chris Brown's perspective, talking about Lil Dicky's balls and saying nobody cares if he was black, or how he's about his past, or how he can now wear blue despite some very questionable blood affiliation that I couldn't quite confirm. And wow, we're just gonna go blow past how over his head Lil Dicky is with any of the questions that he's now trying to highlight with these references. But somehow it is not over, because then Chris Brown as Lil Dicky breaks into the club where Lil Dicky as Chris Brown is, discovered that Chris Brown just needs to love himself, and then they switch back. Only for Lil Dicky to hop into the bodies of Ed Sheeran, DJ Khaled, and Kendall Jenner, who sounds as fucking awful as she does them vocally, as Lil Dicky is now saying that he's going to explore her vagina, and I don't recall any consent given from her. And aside from the pileup of incredibly unsettling implications and non-rhymes in the third verse, it's also screamingly, painfully non-funny. Seriously, what is the joke here? A white guy being able to say the N-word over and over again? Chris Brown being able to escape his awful life choices without any consequences and get that white privilege to be ignored? Making comments about colorism that shows that nobody here has a damn clue what they're talking about. More jokes at the expense of Lil Dicky's dick, and it's already been tired so many times over. And then him hopping into other bodies, the really unsettling context of sexual consent with Kendall, all in this name of self-love. Because that's what this feels like. Masturbation against the cheap facsimile of a joke, and by continuing to put a spotlight on all the gross implications in the lyrics, Lil Dicky continues to somehow make it worse. Not to the point of Aristocrats-esque absurdism, because the production is cheap DJ mustardisms that go nowhere. It doesn't get to the point of being absurd or over the top. It's not funny. It reeks of the privilege and freedom from accountability that neither artist has earned. In a just world, this would end both their careers, or would inspire other artists to do it for them. Can we have that happen? Please. So yeah, much to my amazement, XXXTentacion is only getting dishonorable mention with Going Down this week, because Lil Dicky and Chris Brown are definitely getting the worst with Freaky Friday. One of the worst things I've heard in months. And for the best, oh yeah, Found Tonight by Lin-Manuel, Miranda, and Ben Platt gets the best. I'm just gonna think about that. And I think In My Blood by Shawn Mendes is gonna get honorable mention. It's not really a great song, but on a week as bad as this, I will take what I can get. Next week, folks, The Aftermath. But until next time, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.